Hello everyone, welcome to the Africam show. Always live and always wild, as you know, and back with you again for another half an hour of fun. My name's Russell Gerber, for those of you who haven't joined us before, and always a pleasure to have you with us. And if you have anything on your mind, any questions about the animals, or anything that you've seen over the last week or so, please do feel free to send through those questions on the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them during the show today. And we've kicked off the show today with some beautiful ostriches having an afternoon snack, with one of our stripy friends in the background, of course, beautiful plains zebra, and what looks like a little guinea fowl feeding in the grass just to the right of our ostriches. And just arriving on the scene, some of the many new youngsters that we have about in the bush, which is pretty typical for this time of year, as we head into summer and some wonderful rains that have been hitting the interior parts of the country. So we are well into our rainy season now, and so far it's been pretty productive. I know we had heavy rains around Campers Dam and the whole Bloemfontein Orange Free State area, which is very much the central part of South Africa. And they had heavy rain over the last few days. Even some property damage in certain areas, so I hope everyone is okay up there. But for a lot of the year, and sometimes even for many years, even sometimes for a decade or so, those areas don't see a lot of rain. So it can be a blessing in disguise. Certainly when we get so much rain in a short period like that. But you'll find that in the coming weeks, as things dry up again and the water dissipates, we'll have a very quick transition to very green landscapes. I was just having a look at that zebra if he was perhaps interested in something, but they look very calm right now. Of course, we had quite a lot of lion action around Tau in the last week or so, with a number of poor wildebeest reaching their end at the hands of some pretty skilled lionesses. But it seems they've moved on for now. This looks like a little family of ostrich. Looks like the big male in the background, just arriving on the scene on the left of all of them now. The males tend to be much darker, their feathers almost black, whereas the females are more greyish brown colour. Perhaps another male in the foreground on the right there. It's hard to tell in this light, but yeah, likely a small family unit. There may have been chicks earlier this year. It's always fun to look at them. Such a strange looking animal. don't forget, folks, if you do have any questions or anything on your mind, please do give us a shout. Even if you just want to say hi, it's always nice to hear from all of you and where in the world you're watching us from. As I said, we've got some lovely highlights for you today as well on the show. And one of which has been, I'm sure many of you have seen it already, but it's definitely one of my favorite clips from the year. And it happened just a few days ago, but we'll get to that a little later on in the show. But it is about what is a leopard, that particular clip. And your quiz question today is about leopards. And put that to you now before we go into our first highlight. And that quiz question is, what is the maximum speed of a leopard? Or how fast can a leopard run? So let me know your thoughts and we'll get to that answer towards the end of the show. But without further ado, I think let's go into our first little highlight of the day. This, of course, a beautiful clip of a crocodile. Let you just listen to the wonderful night sounds for a minute. Now this is, of course, that wonderful crocodile at Naledi Dam, which has been entertaining us quite a lot over the last week or so. We had a few standoffs with the tortoises. He's just been busy. He's been grabbing an odd dung beetle that's been wandering by. But he's been a really busy crocodile, which is quite unusual for this particular species, of course, and for reptiles in general, being cold-blooded, poikilothermic. But of course it's much warmer now. And there he is, attempting to grab yet another unwilling invertebrate running by. But he's been really busy, like I said. We haven't seen him the last few days, so it's very possible he's moved on to greener pastures. I was wondering about that behavior of how he was always out the water and trying to catch things next to the water hole. Suggests there might not be quite enough food available for him in the water. Of course, things like frogs, fish, etc. will be their main prey species, especially when they're young like that. They'll take anything they can get, of course. But we're back live now at Campers Dam. Of course, our beautiful flamingos in the background. We've got some black-winged stilts. Looks like a teal as well. Looks like a few teals around them. Hidden in the grass. But let me know what your thoughts are on that leopard question and how fast they are. We've got Candice Watkins has already given us a guess. Pretty good guess, Candice. I hope you didn't Google the answer. But I trust you. But yes, they're pretty quick, as you can imagine. As I said, we'll get to that answer a little later on. looking pretty peaceful at Comfers. Like I said, we've had some good rain around in recent times. Then we're just going to head over to one of our other cameras. Being welcomed by a hippo, of course. This is at Olifants River. And it looks like we're having a few technical issues there with signal, which is not unusual. Most of the cameras run off cellular signal, and when there are storms about, as there are in the summer, can sometimes interfere with that. But we've now crossed over to Naledi, where our crocodile was hanging out. I think we had a giraffe hanging out off in the distance. We had a question from Pat in Florida. Hi Pat, lovely to have you with us again. She asks, he asks, do lions ever hunt ostriches? They absolutely do, yes. In certain cases, they will take on an ostrich. It is a potentially dangerous prey species for them, but their power and size of the lions tends to give them a great advantage. And in areas where there is a good lion population, generally ostriches will move away from that area. Even though they're pretty quick, they're not particularly fast off the mark. Nowhere near as fast as lions off the mark, so yeah, you don't tend to see them, too many of them, in areas where there's high numbers of lions, but they do certainly hunt them. So thank you for your question, Pat. And Stephanie Hardy says, hi Stephanie, first of all, says the Naledi croc walked off a day or so ago. Not sure where it was headed. Yeah, that's also the info that we have as well. Not sure where he is, or she is, just yet. I think I mentioned on the show last week, it's very common for crocodiles to move between water sources, and sometimes very long distances, without too much trouble. All depending on availability of food. That crocodile is not particularly big, so it will generally try to stay away from bodies of water that are small. If there's another big crocodile there, they'll generally steer clear of that. But in the river, where there's plenty of space for everyone, crocodiles are not too worried in terms of territories. And a quick hello to Mary from Staten Island as well. Hi Mary, thanks for joining us. And a little message from Chad Peer after what Kentucky and Illinois just went through on Saturday. This is a more calm atmosphere. Absolutely, Chad. My thoughts are with all of our friends from Kentucky and Illinois. I hope everyone's okay. Yeah, we certainly don't get the storms that you do in the Midwest and central parts of America. Down here in South Africa, we do get pretty decent afternoon thunder showers and often go from drought periods to flooding periods, but not quite the severity of the storms they've been having over there. So I hope everyone is okay. We just crossed over back to town now. We've got some pretty reddish looking elephants, little breeding herd. The little youngster in the shadows of mom. Looks like our Ellies have been wallowing in some good clay mud soils. That's what gives them the red color like that. And Jane Robbins asks, do male ostriches fight in the wild? Jane, yes they do, especially over females. It's generally not overly violent. They do mainly a display really with their wings. Like that young elephant shaking its ears. It's something that was bothering it. Perhaps the ostrich is getting a little too close for that young Ellie calf's liking. As I was saying, the male the male ostriches, as I say, tend to do more of a display fight. Can sometimes get fairly violent if they're evenly matched. Most of the time everyone walks away intact, perhaps with not quite their egos intact for one of them. But that tends to be how it goes. Thank you for your question though. It's always fun chatting about the ostriches. And Mary Momo is with us from Arkansas. Hi Mary, lovely to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. And who else is out there? Deborah is with us as well. Deborah Andrews, I think from Mississippi. Hi Deborah, thanks for joining us. Asking about having a serval as a pet in Mississippi, and asking why, to perhaps help educate people as to why it's not a good idea to have a serval as a pet. Well, I agree with you, Deborah, though I don't like to sound too preachy. I would say that these are generally wild animals, of course, and have natural wild instincts. Can be very dangerous if not cared for properly. Just like any wild animal really, they're just not used to being domesticated, and a lot of things can go wrong, particularly for their own health. Not always easy to care for them correctly, so I would never encourage anyone to keep traditionally wild animals as a pet of any kind, but that's simply my opinion. Thanks for the comment, Deborah. And we've got Margie Rees from Melbourne, Australia. Welcome, Margie. Lovely to have you with us. Well, as we watch our elephants move into the thick brush, let's go to our next highlight that we wanted to show you. Talking about domestic things, Deborah. Now, there's been some debate about this one too. What looks to be a domestic cat that took a swim through the water at Olifants. Now, just looking at the face and the white chin, white marks on its face as well, it does suggest that it is indeed a domestic cat and not African wild cat. It's not so easy to tell, of course, in the dark. Infrared cameras can be misleading as well, but it does look like a domestic cat to me. And of course they do get into the reserves from time to time. Domestic cats, dogs, even cattle can sometimes wander into these areas. For the most part they struggle to survive. Of course, the potential for being preyed upon by a number of predators, especially when crossing a river like the Olifants, or even things like leopard, lion, jackals, even big eagles. Yeah, it's generally very difficult for them to survive, but they do interact with other species. Domestic cats actually interbreed with African wildcats from time to time, and it's been a big part of the drive for the conservation of the African wildcat. The bloodline, of course, can get mixed quite easily with domestic variants, and that's hugely challenging to stop, of course. So the reserves in South Africa and other parts of Africa do the best they can to keep domestic animals away from the wild or their wild counterparts. A really fun clip as well. This mommy elephant looks a little bit anxious about something. I don't know if those ostriches are still bothering her. They, of course, are no threat to her calf or to her. But sometimes elephants just get a bit grumpy. They don't like to share the waterhole. Yeah, she's giving a little head shake. Definitely a little bit nervous. There doesn't seem to be anything really to be nervous about. The zebras look as calm as can be. Another youngster arriving on the scene here. I imagine there's some other adult females about. It's unlikely she would have calves so closely ranging in size like that, though it is possible. But I'm sure there's more of a herd off in the distance. They'll take turns looking after the youngsters within the herd, but if there is an emergency, the calves will generally go to their maternal mama. And we got a couple of quiz answers out there as well. Tammy reckons 65 miles an hour. It's a good guess, Tammy. We'll get to that a little later. Stephanie can't remember the leopard speed, but she has 60 kilometers per hour stuck in her head. So 60 kilometers per hour and not 65 miles. Good guesses out there, folks. We'll get to that answer a little bit later on. Now, zebras have been bugged by something as well. Not sure what though. Maybe the elephants themselves just made everyone anxious. Now, zebra slowly exiting stage left. As they do so, let's have a look at our next highlight for the day. And this one, another one of the popular favorites out there. Some wild dogs at Naledi Dam. These are indeed the adults of the pups we've been seeing in the den recently. I love watching the dogs by the water. They're always so anxious. Of course, they would have been aware there was a crocodile here for quite some time. But they're always very nervous about going into the water. Unlike the hyenas, which I'm sure many of you seen, will happily go and wander into a shallow little dam like this one. Wild dogs, of course, much more slender and slight than hyena, and so much more vulnerable to the attack of a crocodile. As you can see, they're not so sure about that little waterhole. Definitely one of my favorite animals to see. There's another great little clip from a few days ago. We're back live now, of course. A towel. Our Egyptian geese making a racket. Looks like some white-faced ducks by the water. Really beautiful sight this, with all these zebra by the water. It's nothing quite as pretty as watching a herd of zebra lined up and having a drink. You can see the youngster in the background, a little anxious, but generally will follow in the footsteps of Mom. And then Corin commented about the wild cats we were chatting about earlier, and domestic cats and African wild cats intermingling, that they have the same issue with wild and domestic cats in Scotland. And she mentions probably even tougher to prevent, as there's even more of a human population. Absolutely right, Karen. It's a very difficult thing to manage. Almost impossible, you would have to argue. But there's been a number of programs around, particularly around the nature reserves here in South Africa and national parks, where they've worked on a method of essentially birth control, and to stop the cats from breeding as much as possible. The domestic ones, of course, I'm talking about. So we'll have to see how that all goes over the next few years. But a very, very challenging conservation issue. Thank you for your comment. And before we run out of time today, let's get to our quiz answer. So many of you gave us some excellent answers, as I mentioned. But the correct answer is around about 60 kilometers per hour is the top speed of a leopard. Now in this next clip, which as I mentioned to you is easily one of my favorites from this year, you'll get just a little sense of that speed. And I'll give you just a moment to watch and see how this all unfolds. Now, I don't know what that was that gave her such a fright, but it does give you an idea of how incredibly quick they can move. And even though we don't see her get up to speed in that instance, their reaction times are unbelievable. And this was, of course, the beautiful Watika, a leopard we've seen a few times around, and that was at Nkoro. But seeing how quick they can react gives you just a touch of an idea, as I said, of how quickly they can move when they have to either get away from potential danger, but of course when they're chasing down prey. And even though that top speed of around 60 kilometers per hour doesn't seem to be incredibly high when you consider a cheetah recorded at around 100 kilometers per hour. In some areas even more, or has been reported as more than that. The major skill of leopard, lions and cheetah alike is how quickly they can get up to that speed, and over a distance of around 5 or 6 meters they're faster than just about any potential prey out there in that short distance, and that's really how they get their success in hunting. Of course, the great difficulty is getting close enough to be able to use that burst of speed, and that's why it's a pretty tough business to catch your dinner as a big cat here in Africa. But thank you for your guesses, folks, and all your interaction today. It's been really fun hanging out with you again. I hope you enjoyed the show and some peaceful African time. But we will be back again, of course. I unfortunately will not be back again this year. Off for a little break myself. So just from myself to all of you out there, have a wonderful festive season. And I hope you all have a little break in store at some point. But keep an eye on the cameras. We will have another show next week. Another guide taking over for me. But I will indeed be back next year for the Africam show. But until then, have a wonderful holiday season, as I mentioned. A wonderful New Year's. I'll see you all again in January 2022. Thanks again for watching. Cheers for now.